Welcome to Arsenal, where the weapons and war machines of military history come to life. Today, we explore the Cyclone-class patrol ships in the Persian Gulf in the post-Cold War era, and the crews and opponents who gave them their reputation. If you enjoy learning how technology, tactics, and human decisions come together in combat, you can find more articles, podcasts, and resources at trackpads.com. The northern Persian Gulf is glassy and calm, but the bridge of the little patrol ship is anything but quiet. It is late August 2016, and a Cyclone-class coastal patrol ship is running a security patrol near the tight seam where the waters of Kuwait, Iraq, and Iran meet. Radar scopes show tiny returns from fishing dhows, workboats, and other small craft. Outside the bridge windows, the night is a smear of running lights and distant shore glow. On a ship this small, every vibration and course change feels personal. One contact begins to stand out. A low, fast craft has broken out from the Iranian side and is cutting across the natural flow of traffic. The officer of the deck watches the range numbers fall, while reports come in from the radar operator and lookouts. Bridge-to-bridge warnings go out in calm, rehearsed English. A loudhailer message follows across the water. Arsenal is the Friday feature of Dispatch, U.S. Military History magazine. When the craft keeps coming, the patrol ship escalates. Flares hiss into the night, throwing harsh white light over a dark hull and churning wake. 200 yards of water is not much space at these speeds, and everyone on the bridge understands how quickly that gap can vanish. Their mission is simple to say and hard to carry out. Keep potential threats away from tankers, oil platforms, and coalition warships without turning every close pass into a firefight. On the narrow weathered decks, gunners brace behind mounted machine guns, their headsets crackling with orders. In this environment, hesitation can be deadly, but a mistake can be just as costly. When the command comes, short bursts of .50 caliber fire stitch the water ahead of the intruder, sending white plumes of spray into the night. The message is unmistakable and intentionally short of a hit. The small craft finally turns away toward its own coastline, and the confrontation ends as abruptly as it began. On the Cyclone-class ship, the engines keep their steady rumble and the patrol resumes. For crews on these compact ships, this kind of close-range dance with risk was routine rather than exceptional. To understand why the Navy built them and why they spent so much of their careers in tight and dangerous waters, we need to step back from that night and look at the larger problems that emerged after Vietnam and into the late Cold War. By the 1980s, the United States Navy was a blue-water giant built to meet Soviet forces on the open ocean. Aircraft carriers, cruisers, and destroyers were designed for long-range naval war. Yet many real problems kept happening close to the coastline. In Vietnam and later crises, special operations units and patrol sailors had relied on modest 65-foot patrol boats to move SEALs, watch coastlines, and confront smugglers and gunrunners in shallow water. Those boats were aging and had never been a permanent answer. At the same time, coastal zones were becoming more dangerous. The tanker war in the Persian Gulf showed how small boats, mines, and improvised attacks could threaten oil traffic and warships in confined waters. In the Caribbean and Arabian Gulf, navies and coast guards faced low-signature targets every day. Fishing dhows could be harmless, or they could be smugglers. Speedboats might be innocent, or they might carry weapons or explosives. Large warships could intimidate, but they could not chase every contact into shallow channels or put boarding teams alongside with the agility of a small craft. Strategists also began rethinking the littorals, that narrow band of sea where shipping lanes, oil terminals, and coastal cities are most exposed. The Navy needed more than carriers and destroyers. It needed fast, maneuverable patrol craft that could work with SEALs and other special operations forces, carry teams close to hostile coasts, deliver them, and remain nearby with guns, sensors, and a reliable ride home. An early attempt tried to solve the problem with a high-tech surface effect craft nicknamed Sea Viking, a hover-style boat designed to ride on a cushion of air. On paper, it promised speed and stealth. In practice, it proved too complex, fragile, and expensive for rough daily patrol work. The prototype never became a dependable fleet asset. Planners then turned toward a simpler and more robust coastal patrol ship, a small but seaworthy hull, fast enough to chase or evade, with enough armament and endurance to hold the line in restricted waters. Out of that requirement came the Cyclone-class Patrol Ship. It was intended to replace Vietnam-era patrol boats and give Special Operations Forces a dedicated platform. It also filled a widening coastal security gap overseas and, eventually, near American shores. These ships would spend much of their service life in some of the world's busiest and most volatile sea lanes, where calm water and clear skies often hid real danger. The design began as a rugged replacement for small patrol craft that had supported SEAL insertions and extractions. After Sea Viking failed to become a practical solution, the Navy looked at proven fast patrol craft used by foreign navies and adapted the best ideas into a purpose-built American coastal patrol ship. Bollinger Shipyards in Louisiana won the contract and produced a compact steel hull with an aluminum superstructure, strong enough for hard turns and high speed in rough coastal seas. The ships were officially designated Patrol Coastal, or PC. The lead ship, USS Cyclone, joined the fleet in the early 1990s. The original plan called for 16 ships, but the program stopped at 14. The class sat in an awkward middle space, larger than SEALs preferred for stealthy insertion, yet smaller than many surface warfare officers wanted for extended blue water operations. That tension would follow the class throughout its life. At a glance, a Cyclone-class ship was a small coastal patrol combatant built for the immediate post-Cold War Navy. It was designed for coastal patrol, maritime interdiction, and special operations support, not open ocean duels. Each ship displaced roughly 350 tons and measured a little over 50 meters from bow to stern. A typical crew included about 4 officers and 24 enlisted sailors, with room for a small SEAL or law enforcement detachment. Primary armament centered on twin-stabilized 25mm chain guns, backed by 50-caliber machine guns and automatic grenade launchers. Some hulls later received short-range surface-to-surface missiles for added reach against fast attack craft. Top speed was roughly 35 knots, with endurance measured in days rather than weeks. Most of the class entered service between 1993 and 1994 as the Navy shifted from a single Soviet rival to regional crises and coastal flashpoints. Initially, many Cyclone-class ships supported special warfare along American coasts, practicing insertions, extractions, and patrols. As demands changed, several were loaned to the United States Coast Guard for homeland security, port security, and counter-smuggling work. Others rotated toward forward bases overseas. By the early 2000s, a niche special operations platform had become one of the Navy's most useful tools for persistent presence in crowded and politically sensitive coastal waters, especially in the Persian Gulf. Seen from the pier, a Cyclone-class patrol ship looks like a warship shrunk in the wash. The hull rides low, with a flared bow and clean run aft for high-speed coastal operations. A compact superstructure stacks the bridge, operation spaces, and communications masts into a tight package. Antennas, radars, and small-caliber weapons occupy almost every useful surface. Twin 25mm mounts sit fore and aft, while machine guns and grenade launchers line the weather decks with overlapping arcs. On later deployments, small box launchers for short-range missiles added another layer of sting against fast boats that press too close. Once aboard, the scale becomes real. Passageways are tight, overheads are low, and there is almost no unused space. The bridge sits high and forward, with wide windows giving watch officers the best possible view in cluttered coastal traffic.
A helmsman manages wheel and throttles, while the officer of the deck and quartermaster juggle radar plots, visual bearings, and radio calls. Behind and below the bridge, a compact combat information center pulls together radar, navigation, and communications in one dimly lit space. From there, watchstanders track dozens of small contacts and coordinate with larger warships and aircraft over the horizon.
Further aft, cramped berthing compartments hold the crew in stacked racks. The mess deck doubles as lounge, classroom, and planning room, where sailors eat, relax, and where boarding teams or SEALs spread charts before a mission. Below, engineering spaces pack powerful diesel engines and reduction gear into a very small footprint, driving propellers that can push the ship from a dead stop to sprint speed in minutes. Noise, heat, and vibration are constant companions for engineers working there.
On the weather decks, gun crews live close to their weapons. A .50 caliber gunner stands behind an armor shield, harness clipped in, scanning for anything wrong. A boat running too fast, a dhow sitting too low, or a wake that does not match normal traffic. Nearby, a grenadier tends a 40mm automatic launcher. Shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles are stowed for unexpected low-flying aircraft or helicopters. This concentration of short-range firepower gives the Cyclone-class its bite. It is a small ship that can throw a surprising amount of metal into a close fight. Crew routines turned all that machinery into a working whole. Sailors stood frequent watches, rotated through lookout duty, maintenance, and damage control drills, and lived with little separation between work and rest. Veterans remember sleepless nights tracking small contacts, sudden calls to man the rails, and the heavy shudder of the hull as the ship accelerated toward a developing situation. The Cyclone-class was not comfortable or spacious, but it gave crews what they needed in the littorals: speed, firepower, and enough endurance to stay on station when the water was crowded and tense.
The class's combat story took shape after the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Instead of one grand fleet action, its baptism of fire came through long months of patrols in the Northern Arabian Gulf. Cyclone-class ships had to protect Iraq's offshore oil terminals, Al-Basra and Khawr al-Amaya, from mines, suicide boats, and disguised attackers. Those platforms were economic lifelines for the new Iraqi state and high-value symbols for insurgents. The patrol ships and their boarding teams held a protective ring around them day and night.
On those watches, anything unusual could be serious. Crews scanned dhows, tugs, and fishing skiffs, trying to separate harmless traffic from potential attackers. On the night of 24 April 2004, that routine turned deadly for USS Firebolt. While Firebolt was providing security near Khawr al-Amaya, her rigid hull inflatable boat approached a suspicious dhow heading toward the terminal. As the boarding team drew alongside, the dhow exploded in an apparent suicide attack, capsizing the small craft and killing 2 sailors and a Coast Guardsman. Their sacrifice kept the attacking boat from reaching its target and showed how exposed small patrol craft and boarding teams could be. Firebolt's loss did not end the mission. Other ships maintained the exclusion zone, enforced standoff distances, escorted tankers, challenged suspicious contacts, and worked with coalition units to separate local traffic from threats. Later that year, ships such as Typhoon and Sirocco helped guard the same infrastructure. The pattern was set: constant presence by small ships whose names rarely made headlines, but whose work was essential to keeping oil flowing and denying insurgents a dramatic coastal strike. Over time, that mission expanded from Iraq's oil platforms into a broader maritime security campaign. Cyclone-class ships supported operations against smugglers off the Horn of Africa, chased suspicious vessels, and intercepted arms shipments in the Gulf of Oman. In the Persian Gulf, they often faced fast Iranian craft, trading warnings by radio and loudhailer. Close approaches drew warning flares and machine gun bursts into the water, reminders that routine patrols could tilt toward crisis in seconds. By the mid-2010s, with most of the class home-ported in Bahrain, Cyclone-class ships were familiar players in tense small boat confrontations across narrow seas. Crews often described presence as the ship's greatest strength. A Cyclone-class patrol ship was small enough to work near oil platforms, breakwaters, and shipping lanes without overwhelming the scene, yet fast enough to sprint toward a developing contact. Its shallow draft let it operate closer to shoals and channels than larger combatants. Its mix of 25mm guns, 50 caliber mounts, and grenade launchers created a dense, quick-reacting wall of fire. In encounters where another 100 yards could decide whether a boat was a threat or merely confused, speed and firepower mattered.
The human side mattered just as much. With roughly 30 people aboard, everyone knew everyone, and the distance between bridge, engineering spaces, and guns was measured in steps. That intimacy helped in urgent situations because orders and decisions moved quickly through the ship. Boarding teams could brief around a mess table, kit up, and climb into the rigid hull boat within minutes, while watchstanders maintained the local picture with radar, optics, and radio reports. For special operations forces, the Cyclone class offered a dedicated platform that could move them close to shore and remain nearby as guardian and ride home. Those strengths came with hard limits. The small hull that made the ship useful in tight waters also made heavy seas punishing and restricted fuel, ammunition, and food. Long patrols in rough weather were physically demanding, and the ships depended on tenders, larger warships, and shore facilities for maintenance and resupply. As the years passed, hull fatigue became a concern, and inspections increased as the class showed more wear than expected. Against aircraft, anti-ship missiles, or heavy guns, a Cyclone-class ship relied on the broader force around it, with larger escorts and layered defenses providing protection while it handled close-in work. Opponents adapted to those realities. Because the ship's power lay in short-range sensors and weapons, hostile actors used cluttered traffic, darkness, and suicide tactics that exploited the need to get close enough to identify a threat before firing. Compared with a frigate or destroyer, a Cyclone-class ship did not carry long-range missiles or a helicopter. It was not built for that kind of duel. Its mission was to stand in the gap between large combatants and small, ambiguous threats. In that niche, its advantages and vulnerabilities were inseparable. It was close enough to see almost everything, and close enough that almost anything could hurt it. The class never developed dramatic Mark II or Mark III variants. 14 near-sister ships left the yard with similar hulls and basic armament. The real evolution came through equipment upgrades and changing missions. Early in their careers, they focused on special operations support, fast boats, small teams, and insertion or extraction near contested coasts. Later, many received improved communications, navigation, and surveillance gear to operate as frontline maritime security platforms in congested shipping lanes. The most visible hardware change was the addition of guided missiles. To give the ships a better answer to fast attack craft and swarm tactics, the Navy integrated the Griffin missile into the Mark 60 Patrol Coastal Griffin missile system on forward-deployed Cyclone-class ships. This upgrade extended their reach beyond guns and machine guns, allowing them to engage small, maneuvering boats at several kilometers with precision-guided weapons. Test firings from ships such as Tempest and Firebolt in the Arabian Gulf showed compact patrol craft adopting tools more often associated with larger surface combatants. Operationally, the class evolved through transfers and reassignments rather than new construction. Several ships spent years with the United States Coast Guard, focusing on port security, counter-smuggling, and coastal patrol before returning to Navy control as overseas demands grew. Late in their service lives, others transferred to Bahrain, Egypt, and the Philippines. Under new flags and names, they continued familiar missions: coastal patrol, escort, and interdiction. The basic concept remained the same: a fast, small coastal warship packed with short-range sensors and weapons, built to stand watch where larger ships could not linger. By the time the last Cyclone-class ships left United States Navy service in 2023, They had followed a familiar naval pattern. A specialized design arrived quietly, worked hard in an unfashionable corner of strategy, and slipped into the background as newer platforms took the spotlight. Their legacy lives on in today's thinking about littoral warfare: persistent small ship presence near critical infrastructure, precision weapons on compact hulls, and close partnership among patrol craft, special operations forces, and larger surface combatants. The class did not simply vanish. Several former Cyclone-class ships now serve with the Philippine Navy as Alvarez-class patrol vessels, keeping their lean silhouettes and small crew ethos under new names. Others joined the Royal Bahrain Naval Forces and the Egyptian Navy, continuing coastal patrol, escort, and interdiction in familiar waters. Some hulls are headed for disposal, but the ships will live on in photographs, models, and veterans' memories of hard watches and close calls.
For readers and listeners, the best way to see the Cyclone class today is through imagery and stories. White hulls against the tan haze of the Gulf, gunners at their stations, missile plumes arcing over calm water, and crews packed into small ships where every contact mattered. Their story connects naturally to accounts of sailors guarding offshore terminals, interviews with patrol ship veterans, and companion arsenal features on other small combatants that shared the same waters. However you encounter them, remember that behind every compact hull and ring of machine guns were crews who lived shoulder to shoulder with risk, in a band of water where one fast boat could change everything. Narrated versions of Arsenal features are also available through the TrackPads podcast feeds and Dispatch audio editions.